Good afternoon, and thank everyone for their accommodating our voting schedules, and we apologize for any inconvenience. This is a hearing on FDA Medical Device Approval. Is there a better way? First, I'm going to read the mission statement for the Oversight Committee. We exist to secure two fundamental principles. First, Americans have a right to know that the money Washington takes from them is well spent, and second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them. Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers, because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. We will work tirelessly in partnership with citizen watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the federal bureaucracy. This is the mission of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. At this point, I will give an opening statement, and then I will recognize my distinguished colleague for his. I want to start by acknowledging what everyone knows, which is the FDA performs a necessary and vital function in our country. Doctors, patients, nurses, healthcare professionals, and businesses rely on their work every day, whether it's a doctor utilizing a medical device to save the life of a patient or a business introducing the latest innovation to the market. From bandages and pacemakers, the American people deserve, and the federal government demands, safe and effective medical products across the healthcare industry. There is a balance, an important balance to be struck. A paramount concern is always the well-being of the American citizens in need of medical care. In an industry with such wide-ranging economic implications, however, efficiency and safety need not be mutually exclusive. The FDA's goals as an agency are to make safe and effective devices available to consumers and to promote innovation in the medical device industry. Distilled down to a simple mission statement, this philosophy represents a proper and attainable goal. However, the FDA is perhaps failing to meet these standards for myriad reasons: inconsistent review procedures, unpredictability of decision-making, and an amorphous process that fosters uncertainty and inefficiency. And perhaps most troubling, instead of identifying the issues and implementing reforms designed to ameliorate the substantive shortcomings of the approval process, the conveyor belt of medical device approvals has come, in some instances, to a grinding halt. In the pre-medical application and 510K approval processes, device approval times have increased 50 to 100%. Decision times, preliminary procedure durations, and the number of FDA-requested question cycles are all on the rise at the cost to patients and businesses who suffer from these delays. As a result, medical device businesses are exporting products to international consumers long before American buyers or they are leaving the United States altogether, harming both the United States economy and patients who rely on life-saving new technologies. This lack of predictability hurts American businesses, consumers, and patients. We're here today to determine what can be done on their behalf and to ask simply whether or not there is a better way. And with that, I would recognize the distinguished gentleman from the State of Illinois, the ranking member of this subcommittee, Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me first of all thank you for calling this very important hearing, and I also want to thank you for yielding. I call it important because the Food and Drug Administration is an agency that I have watched closely for a number of years. As a matter of fact, one of my constituents, Dr. Alexander Max Smith, was the director of this agency, and he also was the dean of the medical school at the University of Illinois. And so we've looked at it for a long time. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for ensuring the safety and effectiveness of medical devices that millions of Americans use to help them walk, to help their hearts beat, and to help their children regain their health and live a normal and productive life. The regulations that govern the approval of medical devices are there for a critical and simple reason. They save American lives and prevent injury by medical devices that are unsafe or ineffective. We all understand the importance of protecting jobs and fostering innovation. Illinois is home to hundreds of large and small medical device manufacturers, employing thousands of my constituents, and many of these facilities I have visited. I applaud the technological advances being made each day, some of which have allowed close friends and family to lead productive lives. Nevertheless, I fully understand the importance of striking the right balance between innovation and safety. There are those who believe that the Food and Drug Administration takes too long to review medical devices. For its part, the FDA has offered statistics that the agency says shows it is performing well in this regard. We will hear today from both the FDA and those involved in the medical device industry. As we listen to the testimony today and consider the views of the witnesses, we cannot lose sight of what is ultimately at stake: the lives of average Americans who rely on the FDA to protect them from faulty medical devices that may cause harm. It is the FDA who bears the awesome responsibility of protecting lives by ensuring that medical devices do what the manufacturers claim they do. There are those who have suggested that the FDA's approval process for medical devices should be more like the approval process in the European Union. That is troubling to me because in the European Union, medical device manufacturers do not have to show that their product is actually effective in treating the particular ailment it is supposed to treat. I am sure there isn't anyone in this room who would want a hip implant, a heart stent, or any other device in their body that was not effective. In the past 5 months, at least 15 recalls of medical devices were announced. These recalls involve such products as glucose test strips, catheters, an insulin delivery system, and an implantable infusion pump. Last year, there were over 2,500 recalls of medical devices. One of the most widely covered devices recalled last year involved hip implants that had already been used in 93,000 patients before they were recalled by the company. There is no greater responsibility that our government has than to protect the health and lives of its citizens. That is a responsibility that Congress has bestowed on the FDA, and so I thank our witnesses for being here today, look forward to their testimony, and again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Members may have 7 days to submit opening statements and extraneous material for the record. It is all of our pleasure, all members of the subcommittee, to welcome Our colleague from the great state of Minnesota, Congressman Eric Paulson, who represents the 3rd District. In addition to serving on Ways and Means, Mr. Paulson chairs the Congressional Medical Device Caucus. Congressman Paulson, committee welcomes you and recognizes you for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for the opportunity to appear before the committee. My name is Eric Paulson. As you mentioned, I represent Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District, and I do serve as co-chair of the Medical Technology Caucus. And I'd like to share with you why I believe the medical technology industry, an American success story, one that routinely revolutionizes patient care and creates thousands of high-tech jobs, is at risk of drying up and moving overseas. Now, I can tell you that promoting made-in-America medical devices and encouraging innovation is near and dear to my heart. Across this country, there are 8,000 medical device firms employing 400,000 dedicated, hardworking, and innovative people. Currently, the United States is a world leader in this industry. Its supremacy is threatened not by cheap overseas labor or countries with more competitive tax structures, but by the bureaucracy within our own borders. Whether I'm meeting with medical innovators back home in Minnesota or across the country, I hear the same story. It's getting harder and harder to bring life-saving devices to the marketplace in the United States because of a lack of consistency, predictability, and transparency in the Food and Drug Administration's pre-market review processes. Device companies that deal regularly with the FDA cite many reasons for this inconsistency. One problem is that the FDA seems to be routinely proposing new endpoints midway through the review process. Now, of course, if scientific information calls a device into question, the FDA should request more information. But many of my constituency companies are reporting that the FDA reviewers make new, arbitrary demands late in the product review process. And these inconsistencies are frustrating and costly for all innovators, but small companies in particular cannot keep up when the FDA continually moves the goalpost, which is causing some firms to go out of business. One company in Minnesota, Acorn Cardiovascular, recently had to close its doors due to such inconsistencies. The company had conversation after conversation with FDA staff about how to test its device. Acorn performed a randomized trial, met its targets, and in the end thought it would be approved, but reviewers at the FDA moved the goalposts and required a new trial. Because of this, investors shied away, and Acorn couldn't raise the capital to perform another multi-million-dollar trial and had to close its doors. Ultimately, 50 jobs were lost, and a life-saving technology for patients is now not available in the United States. Additionally, companies have been frustrated with what appear to be FDA stalling techniques. Many entrepreneurs I've met with have had agency reviewers pursue one line of questioning early in the review process and then switch to a new, previously unaddressed topic after the 3rd or 4th submission. In 2008, Xtent, a Menlo Park, California company, coronary stent company, tried to gain approval to start a U.S. clinical trial. Over the next 2 years, the FDA asked round after round of questions and required long preclinical animal trials. Now, at the time, Xtent had clinical experience in hundreds of European patients, some with over 3 years of follow-up in world-class hospitals. But the FDA refused to consider the data, and as a result of the delays, the company closed, 150 employees were laid off, and the assets were sold to foreign interests for pennies on the dollar. Members, today the technology is now being developed in China and in Europe with no plans to return to the United States. Now, this is just one of many examples, and if it pleases the committee, I would like to submit several more for the record. And thanks in part to the inconsistencies like these, we're starting to see our competitive edge disappear. Currently, devices are approved 2 years earlier in Europe than they are in the United States, which deny our patients access to life-saving technology. If this trend continues, more companies will look for greener pastures and take their innovations and their 400,000 high-paying jobs with them. The FDA has a statutory mandate to consider the least burdensome means of demonstrating devices that they meet safety and efficacy standards. And unfortunately, in recent years, the agency has abandoned this principle. The least burdensome provisions should force the agency to find appropriate balance between patient protection and the development of new life-saving products. I'm working on legislation to restore this balance at the agency and other efforts to modernize and streamline the FDA. It is my hope as well, Mr. Chairman, that today's hearing will help us find that balance and a pathway to a more consistent, predictable, and transparent FDA pre-market review process to help the medical technology industry continue to be a bright spot of our economy and ensure patient access to life-saving medical technologies. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear before the committee today, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of all of us, Congressman Paulson, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your work in this area, and I look forward to reviewing your legislation forthwith. Thank you. We will take a quick recess. In fact, I may not even leave, so the second panel can approach and get situated. And when they are situated, we will start again. Until then, we will be briefly recessed. We will now welcome our second panel of, I won't say witnesses, witness singular, Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. Have I pronounced that correctly? Dr. Shuren is the Director of the Centers for Devices and Radiological Health at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify, so I would ask you to rise and lift your right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Dr. Shuren, we will recognize you at this point for your 5-minute opening statement. I'm sure you have done this before. If you have not, there are a series of lights that may help direct you, but if you have a point that you want to finish, even with the red light, feel free to finish your point. I may get you to turn that mic on.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I'm Dr. Jeff Shuren, Director, Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the Food and Drug Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Over the past decade, most indicators of medical device industry success have gone steadily upwards, with solid job growth, venture capital investment, and a positive trade balance. Although the medical device industry has weathered the recession better than most of our industries, including about 6% growth last year, the economic climate has had an adverse impact. And as recent reports note, the recession has also caused companies to change their business models to be more risk-averse and therefore more sensitive to FDA regulatory uncertainties. We recognize that smart FDA regulation is critical to maintain U.S. competitiveness. We are the world's leader in medical device innovation, but we won't retain that position unless we address the challenges that face us today and assure that we have both a strong industry and a strong FDA. According to a recent PwC report, formerly PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I quote, "U.S. success in medical technology during recent decades stems partially from the global leadership of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. FDA's standards and guidelines to ensure safety and efficacy have instilled confidence in the industry's products worldwide. FDA has a responsibility to both facilitate device innovation and assure that devices are safe and effective. Our data reported to Congress in February shows that about 95% of the more than 4,000 medical device applications subject to user fees that we review each year are reviewed within the timeframes that were agreed to by industry under the Medical Device User Fee Act. In those few areas where we just missed some goals, our performance is generally improving. The data also demonstrates a program under strain, with limited capacity to increase performance at current funding levels. However, when I became the director of the Medical Device Center in fall 2009, I had already been hearing concerns expressed by our constituencies. Industry complained that inadequate predictability, consistency, and transparency were stifling innovation. Consumer groups, third-party payers, and some healthcare professionals believe that our largest pre-market review process, called the 510K program, did not provide adequate patient protections or generate sufficient information for them to make well-informed treatment decisions. Even my own staff complained about regulatory programs that in their current form were not well suited for many newer, more complex technologies. Much like a CEO of a big company with a large and diverse clientele, I and my team set about to identify problems and their root causes, starting with a comprehensive assessment of our pre-market review programs. The two reports we released in August 2010 with our analyses and recommendations showed that we have not done as good a job managing our pre-market review programs as we should, and that we needed to take several critical actions to improve the predictability, consistency, and transparency of these programs. For example, we have new reviewers who need better training. We need to improve management oversight and standard operating procedures. We need to provide greater clarity for our staff and for industry through guidance about key parts of our pre-market review and clinical trials programs and how we make benefit-risk determinations. We need to provide greater clarity for industry through guidance and greater interactions about what we need from them to facilitate more efficient, predictable reviews. We need to make greater use of outside experts who understand cutting-edge technologies. And we need to find the means to handle the ever-increasing workload and reduce staff and manager turnover, which is almost double that of FDA's drug and biologic centers. In addition, we need to assure that industry meets its responsibility to provide us with appropriate data. Poor quality submissions, such as those that do not follow current guidance documents or have problems with clinical data, such as missing data, not doing the study we agreed to, or failing to meet endpoints, are significant contributors to delays in pre-market reviews. In January this year, after extensive public input, we announced 25 specific actions we are taking this year to ensure that our pre-market review programs both foster innovation and assure the safety and efficacy of medical devices for American patients. In February, we proposed the Innovation Initiative to accelerate the development and evaluation of important medical devices and improve and strengthen the nation's research infrastructure, promote high-quality regulatory science for all medical devices. In March, we held a public meeting to discuss these proposals, and in the coming weeks, we will announce what actions we plan to take. Mr. Chairman, I commend the subcommittee's efforts and am pleased to answer any questions the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Dr. Shuren. At this point, I would recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Davis, for his 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Shuren. Congressman Paulson just testified, and you were here during that period, and indicated that we might want to look at the way the European Union handles its process. And yet I was thinking that a Price Waterhouse study determined that the United States medical device industry is the best in the world. How do you respond to those two assertions?
Well, I do have concerns about importing the European model here to the U.S., and I'm actually astonished that some in the device industry are calling for us to lower our standards to that of Europe. I don't think it's in the best interest of American patients, our healthcare system, or the U.S. companies. In Europe, you do not need to show that your device is effective, that in fact provides benefits to patients. For example, you will put, let's say, a drug-eluting stent on the market. That device may not work, and so patients can get a device that's ineffective when they had alternative effective treatments. As a result, they put their health at risk, and the healthcare system winds up paying for it. In addition, in Europe, you have pick and pay for your private party reviewer. Reviews are conducted by third parties called notified bodies, but concerns have been raised about them. In fact, the clinical director of the UK regulatory agency said just last year, "I am appalled at how many devices are brought to market with a lack of appropriate clinical data. Nor are notified bodies doing enough to pick up manufacturers' shortcomings." She pointed out that many do not know how to adequately assess or challenge clinical data or tell these companies relying on equivalence that they actually need to do clinical investigations. In fact, these are commercial organizations, and I quote, "many of whom are reluctant to challenge because they fear losing their clients and for their survival." And many of these concerns were pointed out recently in articles that came out in the British Medical Journal and by the European Society of Cardiology.
Do you think that there is any evidence that the longer and more intense process has any negative impact on the development of jobs and work opportunities?
Well, I do think that we can do a far better job than what we are already doing. And there are steps that we have announced and are already taking that we think can actually make the process more efficient, and try to get innovative technologies out to the market in a more timely manner, but not compromise our standard of safety and effectiveness. We do have a great standard that we need to stand behind. And if we had to take a play out of the playbook of the European Union, the European Commission is now getting behind their approval process they call the CE mark. Here in the U.S., we beat ourselves up, and the Europeans are taking advantage of it. But we need to get behind a system that, quite frankly, has good standards. We need to make it more robust and efficient. And if we can promote our system as the gold standard, we can actually promote greater competitiveness for the U.S. and for U.S. companies.
I know that diabetes is a major health problem and issue in the country, and research